Hey, folks, welcome to the show. It's episode number 35, and we're well on our way getting close to the end of the home buying process. Today is step 5 of 6 steps to the home buying process. So, last week we talked about the offer time, obviously. So, we talked about getting the offer done and that sort of thing. This step today is your offer has been accepted. So, it's offer accepted. That's step number 5. So, what's involved in this step? Well, first of all, let's start right from the top. Let's get back to the deposit. We spoke about the deposit last week, about the importance of the deposit, all that kind of stuff. The deposit's very important here, okay? So you need to get that deposit to the listing broker, okay, within 24 hours of your offer getting accepted, okay? And let me tell you why that time is very important. Because if that deposit is good faith deposit, it's a good faith money. It's part and parcel of the offer. It's the consideration part of the offer. It's what solidifies what makes this deal binding, okay? I mean, obviously, you've got a binding, you've got signatures under seal, but without a deposit, you don't have a deal. Let me tell you what can happen if you don't give your deposit over. So you've got 24 hours to hand over the deposit. If you don't hand over the deposit, you technically run the risk of losing that property, because what can happen now is the seller is actually free to accept another offer from another party, because you had 24 hours to give them the money, and if you didn't do it, you're still married to that offer. You're still both married to that offer. But if that seller decides that he wants to entertain another offer, he can entertain another offer and accept it, and you get hip checked right out of the picture. Okay? Very important. Get that deposit into the listing broker as soon as possible. And of course, you're going to be getting a receipt for that deposit. Okay? So the deposit is cashed. Okay? If the deal doesn't go as we said, you get the deposit back. If the deal does fly, it goes towards your purchase price, or more likely part of your down payment. Okay, so now you've done this. So the first thing you want to do is make sure that your financing is in fact in order. Okay, when you met with your mortgage broker, most of the time you went through a partial pre-qualification process, but now you've got to solidify the deal. Okay, that means that you got to deliver on all the promises that you made to that lending institution. Okay, so they're going to need a copy of the offer, they're going to need a copy of the listing, they're going to want to see your verification of down payment. They want to see all that. They're going to want your job letters. They're going to want pay stubs. They're going to want any kind of other conditions that they may have spelt out, maybe a credit card paid out or a loan paid out, anything of that nature. The other thing they may need is an appraisal. Okay, so if an appraisal is necessary for the property, they're going to get a licensed appraiser out to have a look at the property and make sure that the value that you paid for the property, or more importantly, the value of in comparison to the mortgage you're getting, is in check, to make sure that they're not exposed to any kind of risk. If you're coming out of any kind of marriage situation, if you're newly separated, you're going to need separation agreements, all of that stuff. Okay, you're going to have your house in order in terms of being able to sign off on that financing condition. Now, as I had mentioned, when a lender gives you a commitment, so the mortgage broker is going to submit this deal to the lender, they're going to give you back what's called a commitment. And 9 times out of 10, those commitments are attached with conditions. Those conditions are basically what I talked about. These are things that they may be looking for: separation agreement, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so you make sure that once you hand over all that documentation over to your mortgage broker, and time is of the essence here, folks. Most of the time you only have 5 to 7 days to satisfy conditions. Okay, so make sure that you get this stuff done immediately. Okay, but more importantly, once you've handed that stuff over to the mortgage broker and the mortgage broker has submitted it to the underwriter, it's very important that they get signed off on by the underwriter. Okay, very, very important. The last thing you want to do is get into a situation where you've signed off, or where you're going to waive condition or notify the seller that you have met your conditions, notice of fulfillment of condition, and all of a sudden you can't get the financing. Folks, you've just put yourself into a situation that would require a litigator to get you out of trouble. Okay, so don't do it. Be very, very careful about waiving off condition. Now, having said that, sometimes you're going to meet with perhaps a very experienced mortgage broker, like my wife Karen Montero, for example, where you had a certain expectation from a particular lender. She went after this lender because she felt that obviously it's the best rate and terms for you on the market, and all of a sudden there was something goofy that came up for some reason or another that lender will not do your mortgage. Okay, you got to have a long, hard talk with that mortgage broker in terms of whether they can still get you the money. Okay, we have been in situations where we have advised our buyers to waive condition without a firm commitment from the lender we were dealing with. But that only came as a result of a lot of experience. Karen was very sure that she could get the money from somebody else, and she didn't want to run the risk of the buyer losing the property. Okay, but that's why it's very important to deal with a very good mortgage broker. Somebody fresh out of the gate, be very careful about that. Karen's got a lot of experience. She knows what she's doing, and she can properly advise her clients whether they should go ahead and waive condition on financing. Once your financing is in place, this is when you want to conduct your home inspection. Okay, home inspections typically are done after we get the financing in place, because home inspections, they cost, call it $500. So you're going to pay $500 for a home inspection. You're going to go out, you're going to do a home inspection. Home inspections last anywhere from 2 hours to 5 hours, depending on the house, depending on the age, depending on, the whole mechanics of the thing. Now, most home inspectors require that the buyer comes with them. So you're going to have to take some time off work, okay, if you're working through the day, and go with the home inspector and have a look at the property. They're going to give you a real rundown on the entire property. Now, folks, what you got to remember here is, especially in the resale market, you are not buying a brand new home. And there are going to be things that the home inspector is going to find. Let's face it, you've hired them to find the flaws in the property. They're going to find them. Okay? Now, for the most part, you've got to understand that the seller is not going to correct every single one of these flaws. If they're major, absolutely. If there's vermiculite insulation, then absolutely they should remove it. If there's mold issues, then they should be rectified if they aren't too severe. If the furnace is acting funny, it needs a new heat exchanger, it's pooched. Okay, we get that. But the home inspection is not an instrument to nickel and dime the seller with afterwards. What it is it's a way of satisfying yourself with the general condition of the property, to give you a heads up in terms of any issues that you may want to keep an eye on when you take ownership of the property. But for the most part, you just got to keep that in mind. I'm not saying that you shouldn't renegotiate the offer. Okay, if the report reveals something so bad that you have to go back to the seller and say, hey, you know what? I didn't realize that your roof was shot, because I just didn't get a good view at it. You were looking at it in January, and then all of a sudden, there could be an issue. Not even January, because you won't even even be able to look at it. But I mean, sometimes people just don't pay attention. They do it on the fly. So you've got to keep certain things in mind. Okay, but once you've satisfied your condition on financing, and once you've satisfied yourself with the condition on home inspection, that's when you're going to sign what's called a notice of fulfillment of condition. And that's when you take out all the conditions of the deal, and now you have a firm and binding contract. A sold sticker goes on the property, and the closing process starts. Okay, and that's when the letter gets sent, or the whole package gets sent off to the lawyers, and they start the closing procedure. And that is the topic of next week, which is step 6 of the 6 steps of the home buying process, which is firm and binding contract, and what happens then. Okay? Thanks again for listening to this week's episode of the Real Estate Mortgage Show. If you have any real estate questions, please direct them to me at 519-624-9222 or walter@maximumresults.ca, or you can find me online at www.cambridgehouses.com. If your interests are in mortgages, please feel free to call 519-624-9222 or email Karen@maximumresults.ca, or you can find her online at www.m as in Mary, R as in Roger, financial.ca. Thanks again for listening, and I hope you have a great week.